Well, thanks very much for doing this. This is awesome.
Thanks for calling.
How are things?
Oh, fantastic. I just put out a new album called Checkmate, which is kind of a tribute to a lot of my favorite chess recordings, Albert King, Howlin' Wolf, what else? Otis Rush, Elmore James. A lot of the stuff that I grew up with. And, yeah, it came about. We're going to record a new album, and I wanted to try recording them in my house because I've been living in this new place for about 7 years, and we've never done any recording here other than, just kind of goofing around. So I thought I wanted to record all my new original material here, but I thought first we'll warm up with a bunch of cover tunes and put those in the can. And if it turns out great, then we'll start recording my new album. Well, I was just so happy with the way that the blues covers turned out that we just released it. And it's coming out officially in about 3 weeks.
Oh, fantastic. This is the second interview in a row I've done where someone mentioned Otis Rush.
Oh, yeah.
Interviewed an old blues guy from Chicago named Eddie Clearwater.
Right on.
And he was a big fan and said he was a major influence. What was it about Otis Rush that influenced you so much?
Well, I always loved the song All Your Love I Miss Loving. I mean, I think I heard that when I was a kid. And I just always loved Otis's singing. And, I mean, he's such an amazing singer and a great guitar player. He had put out an album on Atlantic that was really cool, too. I don't know, he's just one of those guys that I love all those cats, I mean, BB, Albert, Otis.
It's cool that you can name them by first name and everyone knows who you're talking about.
Yeah, Magic Sam.
And they had great nicknames.
Yeah, man, they're like, well, to me that music is pretty well the bedrock of like, all the rock music that followed, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Stones and Hendrix, Clapton, Cream, Zeppelin. And the funny thing is, like, without even really just picking songs that I really have liked through the years, and some of them I had played, some I hadn't played before, so we kind of learned them and then, did our own kind of take on it. And, of course, you improvise your own stuff on it. But it turned out that 6 of them are Willie Dixon songs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, Willie Dixon was such a master lyricist and songwriter.
Oh, it was amazing. So you did this instead of your original music. When is the original music going to come out?
I'm just going to hold on and ride with this album for a while, and we'll probably start recording now that I've got the studio established in my basement, and I know it sounds really good. I'll probably record my original stuff here. Maybe later in the year, December.
Well, that's all right. And you're going out on tour next week or this week?
We're sort of always on tour, really. We don't really stop. We just kind of, in the winter months, I usually try to stay pretty close to home if I can, Ontario, and then summer we start traveling around a bit more. In the springtime, I'm heading up to BC for 2 weeks.
So it's true, blues is life, or life is blues.
For me, it's been my whole life. Yeah, I started playing the blues when I was 17, 18 years old in Hamilton with a band called F.L. King, and they were all good friends of a guy named King Biscuit Boy, who was a blues harmonica player, a singer from Hamilton who'd had like a national hit record. So I got to meet Biscuit Boy through those guys, and then about a year later I was in Biscuit Boy's band, so I had been playing the blues pretty well, non-stop for 45 years.
Good Lord.
The Lord is good.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I was 17 when I started. I was 10 when I started playing the guitar, but yeah, I guess back in those days too, in the early 60s, so much music was just influenced by blues, I mean, whether it was Elvis Presley, probably the first white blues singer, or one of them. But then a couple years later, the Stones and the Animals and all that English thing. I mean, blues was very predominant in music.
Yeah, and then of course you got Zeppelin and Hendrix coming out.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, even if you didn't know you were playing blues, you were whose music you were playing. You were playing blues if you were learning some of those songs back then.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
Jimmy Reed and stuff. And yeah, I mean, when I remember a friend of mine, we had a little band together and we were playing, you know, Cream and Who and stuff like that. We were like 14 or 15 and maybe even younger. I have to check the date, but his brother came back from Germany. He'd been in the Air Force there, and he had this green album with this Fish Islands cover with this black dude and two white guys on it. Are You Experienced? And we just went. When we heard that album, it was like, wow, that's all I tried to play after that for a while.
Yeah, he's pretty influential, eh?
I do this thing sometimes called The Evolution of Blues Guitar, which is a solo show that I do once sometimes for workshops or festivals or sometimes for schools. And it's, I kind of trace the development of different guitar players from starting with Robert Johnson through to Lonnie Johnson and also who else? Charlie Christian, T-Bone Walker, B.B. King, and then I hit back on the country guys that electrified Blues, Muddy, and Howlin' Wolf, and Elmore James. And I divided into like urban blues and country blues. And then when I get to the last guy, saying Jimmy played Outer Space Blues.
Yeah, he did, really, didn't he?
Well, I mean, he took all those elements of country blues and city blues, and you know, mashed it all up with a lot of. With some electronic panels and all that stuff, right? I mean, part of it, one part of his persona was that he was this dude from outer space, right? But he was such a phenomenal musician.
Yeah,
I think probably the last kind of major innovator in blues that we've seen for a while.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, the people that I kind of focus on are people that kind of are like real pioneers. Well, Robert Johnson, I mean, he kind of wrote the book on early blues guitar playing and songwriting, and then T-Bone, you know, I mean, he's considered the first electric guitar blues player, and then you got people like B.B. King, who played for so many decades that he's a giant of it. So Muddy Waters, he considered one of the first guys to electrify the country blues. He took that Robert Johnson kind of stuff and that Delta blues and made it louder through an amplifier and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's, you know, I mean, it's like kind of my life's work, blues. And this album, Checkmate's kind of one end product of it right now.
And speaking of blues giants, you played with Bo Diddley.
I did, yeah. I did a couple little tours around Ontario with Bo Diddley. We played the El Macombo, and we went to London, Ontario, and Kitchener, and Hamilton.
What kind of stuff did you pick up from him? Like, did you learn a lot from somebody like that?
Well, I find out of all the guys in the 50s, they were all playing like, you know, shuffles, and then you had Chuck Berry. I feature him in my thing. In my evolution of blues as a guy that took that and went and then straightened it out and turned it into rock and roll rock music, right, which became kind of the predominant beat after that of the 60s that the Stones ran with and the Beatles ran with, and then everybody played, that was the beat of the 60s.
Right.
And, you know, the 40s, and that was like swing beats and, you know, some of the Latin beats, mambos and all that stuff. In the 50s, shuffles, and you also had some of the Latin beats. But like Bo Diddley, he was to me like one of the first funky guys. You know, he was like a really funky guy. I mean, he had this big square guitar, big giant hands, and he was, well, I remember the first time we rehearsed with him at the El Macombo. It was, he looked at the drummer and he goes, "You know how to play the Bo Diddley beat?" And the guy goes, yeah. And he goes, "Don't." Because, you know, he's the guy that goes, well, I mean, people like, it's just gotten confused through the years, right? I mean, you listen to original Bo Diddley records, there's usually no drums on it. There's just guitar, sometimes the second guitar. His girlfriend plays the second guitar, or she'd play like a bass figure on the guitar, but it was always it was rarely a bass player. And then the other cat on Jerome, right on maracas, there was no drums. So drummers just want to go ding 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 ding. That's Bo Diddley goes. That's his part. He's the guy that goes ding dang dang ding dang dang ding dang 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 dang. The drummer. I mean, you get people that don't know that music. Everybody's going to go. The bass player's going to go doom 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 doom. The drummer's going to go jang jang jang. And that's not how music works. You can't all be playing the same thing. No. So I learned. So yeah, I mean, he'd have the bass player doing like a country thing, doom 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 doom, and the drummer playing a simple beat like doom pop doom pop doom pop. So he could go down, go down, down. But yeah.
Wow, so all the rhythm was from his hands.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, he was like the funky guy, right? He's the one funky dude that started. I don't know if people have ever like commented on that, but to me, it just seems like I don't know who else played funky music before him, really. I mean, except for but his music also came out of the Delta, right? I mean, when you listen to Robert Johnson, he's got so many of those grooves that are like doom 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 doom, but he also has the ding 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 went down to the crossroads, and that groove is funky, and Bo Diddley picked up on that kind of funkiness of that Delta sound. But yeah, I mean, I really dug working with him. He also did like some rapping, and he did moonwalking, and I mean, he tried to be he tried to be current. He wasn't just a guy that was like playing his hits, and I always felt like Bo, he was sort of under-recognized, for like really as large of a figure as he is. I'm sure like when I was playing with him, like Chuck Berry would have been playing big halls or, arenas and stuff. And a lot of those 50s rock and rollers, Little Richard and Fats Domino, would be playing much bigger places. But Bo Diddley was playing in bars, playing at the El Macombo.
That's interesting because he is one of the legends.
Yeah, and he was a very nice guy. He was a very cool guy. And I actually played a week with Otis Rush, too. I played a 1 week stint with Otis at a club called Albert's Hall in Toronto.
Well, that must have been something.
Yeah, he wasn't he was a bit of a grumpy guy. But
oh, is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what... I mean, I loved Otis' music, but yeah, I think he got on stage and we were supposed to play 3 sets, and I think like in one set he played like one song or something or 2 songs. He would just go do for 25 minutes, and it was like, so I don't know.
So I read one of your older interviews, where you said that you have to play music with the greasy blues thing going on.
Oh yeah.
What is the greasy blues thing?
I don't know. I don't know if I said that. Sometimes people say things that I mean, to me, it's like, for me, basically, my styles of music that I like, I find if it doesn't have blues in it, then I get pretty bored. So whether it's, I mean, when I hear country music, if it's got some blues in it, like Hank Williams, or if it's bluegrass with, Bill Monroe or all those cats, or rockabilly is, Elvis, or then you got the rock music, Stones and Zeppelin and all that, and the funky guy, R&B people like Wilson Pickett and Etta James and Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye. And I hear the blues in there. I love that music, but yeah, I mean, if it doesn't. Bands like Supertramp or Genesis or, nothing wrong with them, but if I didn't hear any blues in the music, I just lose interest. And I find a lot of modern music, like, they somehow in the 80s, I think they started sucking blues out of everything. I don't know. It seemed like blues was influential through the 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 80s with Stevie Ray and Robert Cray and, some of the bands like even Huey Lewis and those kind of bands, you could tell that they could probably play a bit of blues. But I'm seeing the 90s, bang, I don't know, it's just like they just got rid of that. Now the Gibson company's going bankrupt. That's how bad it is. That's how bad it is. The guitar, which was like the number one most popular instrument in pop music probably for 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, now it's like nobody even knows what one is.
Okay, here's another question that I read in another interview you did. Bob Dylan told you that you would be a star if you lived in LA or New York.
Yeah, I was playing at this. Well, when I started my solo career, it was like I was playing at this club called the Isabella Hotel, and I started playing there in '85, and I played there every week for 5 years. We played Wednesday to Saturday. And that was like the best gig I ever had, really. I mean, it was a tiny little bar. It only held about 100 people, but we packed the place 3 nights a week, and then Wednesdays were a little slower, and then, Tuesdays we'd usually go in, or Wednesday afternoon we'd go in early and we'd rehearse and learn some new original songs I've been writing. And I didn't have to travel. I just lived down the street. I didn't have to be, promoting it because everybody knew the gig was there. And once in a while, if we got a really bigger, higher paying gig, I'd sub out and somebody would fill in for me. Actually, people that filled in for me were like Jeff Healey filled in, the Tragically Hip filled in one time. Obviously before they became really big, but one night I was there on a Wednesday night, sitting in the office talking to the manager, who was also my manager of my career at that time. And the doorman came running in and he goes, "Hey, Bob Dylan just walked up the stairs." So he just peeked down and like, holy shit, Bob Dylan. And he was in town making a movie called, I think it's Hearts of Fire or something like that, or something like that. And he'd been in Toronto for a couple weeks. And I guess some friends of his, a girlfriend of his was a fan of the band, so she brought him to see us, and he stayed for both sets, and in between sets, he said, "If you guys were from LA or New York or Chicago, you'd be famous."
So that makes me want to ask, why didn't you go to LA or New York?
I was like, I actually thought I had that going on for a minute. When I was about 20, around 78, I got an audition with this rockabilly singer in New York City named Robert Gordon. And are you familiar with Robert Gordon?
No, I'm not.
Robert Gordon, he was poised to become pretty big. He was like, had a great voice. His first 2 albums were with Link Ray, and they were great raw records. And then they were on a small label, but they did really well. And then he got signed to RCA, and I guess they were kind of, which was kind of cool because Elvis was on RCA, and so he made 2 records with an English guitar player named Chris Spedding. Do you know Chris Spedding? Or?
No, I don't.
He was like a really good. Chris Spedding actually played guitar for Roxy Music.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he put out a few solo albums, and he's like a very cool kind of rootsy rock, kind of roots rock, like kind of bluesy, a bit rockabilly-ish. Anyway, like a great guitar player, and he made 2 albums with him, and then he quit, and then he was auditioning guys, so I went down and I got the gig, and so I was in New York for a couple months, and I thought, wow, this is going to be, kind of my entry point into the United States, but then it ended up being that the album that he'd just done with Chris Spedding was his second one for RCA, and RCA just pulled the plug on it, and they didn't tour for the album, and they decided they were going to switch directions. So anyway, then I came back to Toronto after that, and I joined a rockabilly band in Toronto called the Bobcats. And the Bobcats made 3 records, and we toured all across Canada, and we played we were sort of like Canada's version of the Stray Cats.
Okay.
And we played the U.S. a little bit. We had 2 LPs on Attic Records, And then, you know, it was just, I started just playing in Toronto, and then when that band dissolved, that's around 1985 when I started when I started playing at the Isabella Hotel. And by that point, I had a wife, and we were starting to have kids and everything, so I just kept I was popular enough that I just kept working here, and at that point, I just gave up the idea of going to the United States.
Why is it so hard for Canadians to break into the States? I mean, there are a few, obviously, like Rush and Neil Young and all.
Yeah, it's kind of like selling sand to the Arabs or something. I don't know. I'm actually playing a big festival this summer in Idaho, and the paperwork is like unbelievable. I've filled out 20 different pages of stuff. I had to get an accountant to fill out a tax paper. I have to, because I'm British, I have to go to the consulate and talk to somebody there.
All for one gig.
Yeah. So I mean, I basically, they make it extremely hard to work down there, and so unless you're planning on moving, because I mean, most of the bands, well, the only Canadian bands that really have made it down there, I would say, are people that moved, that actually live there, right? I mean, Neil Young, Shania Twain, people like that. I mean, very few Canadian acts have ever made it in the United States.
Yeah, the only two that I can think of that stayed at home were, Bryan Adams and Rush.
Yeah, and Bryan Adams, I don't know if he even stayed at home. Did he stay in Vancouver or did he move down there? But there's very few, right? I mean, like people seem to tragically hit, but Blue Rodeo, I mean, those guys, I just know so many stories of people. Oh, I saw them in a bar in New York State, and there was like 80 people and 75 of them were Canadians.
Yeah, so then they come back up here and do 10,000.
I know, exactly. And Colin James, who's like such a well-known blues artist here. I mean, I don't think he'd never played in the U.S. Rarely, I don't think so. No. It's my take on it really, I think, was that you had to move there, and if you move there, then they'll accept you. But if you're a Canadian just going down there, I think they just, like I said, they make it the bureaucracy too hard, and basically they're just like, no thanks, we're not that interested unless you want to move here and become one of us.
Yeah, there's so many that are big in Canada but never made it to the States. It's really interesting to me.
Well, I was asking the lady actually at the union yesterday when I finally handed in this giant sheet of paperwork, and I said, is it this hard for Americans to come up here and play a gig? She goes, oh no, it's like nothing. And I said, well, why? And I said, why? She goes, well, it's supply and demand. She goes, like, a lot more Canadians want to go down to the U.S. and work than Americans want to come up here. So I don't know if that's even true, really, because I don't hear that many Canadians going down there to play, and I see tons of Americans playing up here all the time. Sometimes to the point that I just find it annoying that, it's just like you're at a festival or something, and it's like 3/4 of the artists are American, and you go, why? And then you know that they're getting government grants and our tax dollars are paying to help fund these festivals, and they're hiring mostly Americans. So right. I'm not positive. She may have just said that to me to get me to shut up.
Sorry, I was looking at the lineup for the Blues Festival in Ottawa this year.
Right.
And really, it's only Bryan Adams is the only big Canadian name that's playing at the Blues Fest.
Right. And he's one of my favorite blues singers.
Yeah, he's a great blues singer.
I love his blues playing, guitar playing, too.
Definitely not a blues festival.
No, I mean, they get some blues acts on there. We played there a couple years ago, so I mean, I appreciate that if they want to get like 50,000, 80,000 people out to a show, that they're going to have to hire like Bryan Adams and then have some blues guys on the secondary show where we're on a secondary stage where maybe 10,000 people will be watching them. I mean, when we played the Ottawa Blues Fest the summer before last, I mean, we probably played for like 10,000 people, and I'm sure if it had been strictly a blues festival, it's doubtful there would have even been that many, right? So.
Right. Is there a different mindset when you play, say, a club and then in front of 10,000 people?
It's probably easier to play for a bigger crowd. I mean, you play for a bigger crowd, it's everybody's. Usually, first of all, you're only playing like a 60 or 75 minute set, so you play all your best original material, and a couple of covers in that set and go out and rock it. And then you play in a bar, sometimes you got to play like 2 or 3 shows, so you got to pad in more cover tunes, and it's it's kind of harder work for sure, I think. But that's the blues, right? I think my band is we're a tough, road hardened machine, right? So when we go to play like a 65-minute show or something, we'll kill it, because to us it's like we've been lifting. We've been doing the equivalent of musical weightlifting for 2 months of playing, clubs and late nights and playing 2.5 hours a night. I don't know if I approach it any differently, other than it's just kind of a bit easier.
That's interesting. You think people would be more difficult.
I remember reading an interview with actually Bob Dylan, coincidentally, and he said the same thing. He said playing for if you play in a room for 40 people, they're all like individuals watching you play with their own kind of, with their own kind of thoughts and their own kind of, take on it and taking it in an individual way. He goes, but when you're playing for 40,000 people, it's like this kind of big mob mentality. Everybody's sort of carried away by the size of the crowd and the energy and the enthusiasm, that people are just like, this is fantastic. To me, I get someone say, my wife says, Auntie Gladys and Uncle Bill are here. Can you play them a tune? And there's like 6 people in the living room. I'm like, ready to throw up. I'm like, really? I got to play for 8 people in the living room now? I'm not prepared. It's just like, but if it was at like 80,000, that'd be, okay, where's the stage?
Wow, that's interesting. I thought it would have been the opposite.
No.
Okay. So you are coming to Ottawa in June. What can we expect?
We're also out that way in April. We're playing at Arnprior. Is that? Yeah,
that's pretty close by. It's about an hour away.
Yeah. Anyway, for those shows there, that'd be like your two 75-minute shows. I play a lot of original material and then some classic blues tunes and some classic R&B tunes too, if people want to dance. Yeah, I like I said, I like so many different kinds of music, right? So my music incorporates blues is the main thread that runs through it, but we'll play funky blues, we play rock and roll blues, we play some swing blues, and we play shuffle blues. It's all like that's kind of my style, and I see a lot of bands from Chicago actually playing. If you see a lot of bands from Chicago, they'll do the same thing. They'll play rock and Stones type blues, and they'll play your straight up Chicago shuffle blues, and they'll do a swing, and then they'll do a couple of funky tunes. So that's I like to just mix up the rhythms, and it's my band's high energy. We have keyboards, really good keyboard player, good sax player, bass and drums, and me. So it's like there's always something going on, and lots of solos, and it's a high energy, fun show. We play some theater shows sometimes too. Those I approach a little bit differently, because for a theater show, you can actually bring it way down, and get slow, play a few more slow songs, get quieter, really work with the dynamics. But sometimes in a club, it's kind of, you try to keep it a bit more high energy to keep everybody engaged for the entire 3 hours, right?
That's a lot of rock and roll, a lot of blues.
Yeah, well, I worked with, like I said, Bo Diddley and a bunch of people from Chicago, actually. Etta James, I did a week-long stint with her. I did a lot of gigs with Muddy Waters ex-drummer Willie Big Ice Smith. And those guys, man, Willie would drive from Chicago, like a 8-hour drive or whatever, 9-hour drive, and then he'd have a hamburger and a beer, and then we'd start playing, and he'd play like a 90-minute set. He'd be like, And he'd be like, hey, Willie, should we take a break yet? You go, what time is it? You go, oh, we'll do one more. He'd play like, he'd play like 100-minute set, and then he'd take like a 10, 20-minute break, and he'd be back up there, and then he'd play like another 2 hours. I mean, those guys, they're tough. They're tough, and they love to play.
Well, it's their life, right? It's in their blood.
Yeah, I mean, strong people. And, those are the people that I studied under, and I think my music owes a lot to Chicago blues and chess records in particular, and all those people. And I was lucky to have worked with a lot of them. Like Bo Diddley was on chess. Willie Big Eye Smith played with Muddy, who was all on chess. Etta James was a chess artist. Otis Rush cut some sides for chess. A bass player named Bob Stroger, who also worked with Otis Rush.
That's a long line of, I guess we could say legends that you've played with. That's very cool.
Yeah, well, back in the day, it was like a lot of these guys would come through town, and the club scene was, I guess it was a bit more livelier back then, and these people would come through town, and they wouldn't be able to afford to bring their band, so they'd hire the local blues people, blues experts to back them up. So I'd always get called.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, I'm looking really forward to that show. I'll be there front and center. I might not be dancing, but I'll be watching. Yeah,
the Rainbows it's a fun venue. It's got a balcony. It's like it's a funky old place. I mean, that place has been going almost as long as me. I think I've been playing there since the 80s pretty well.
All right. Good luck, and we'll see you in June.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thanks for your time. Hope I wasn't babbling on too much.
I like babbling on. I think it's great.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much.